Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. It is November 12th today, 2023, and we are going to kick ourselves off by talking about the WWE earnings call, or at least a little bit of it that popped out. The biggest information that came from the WWE earnings call last week was the news that NXT will be moving to the CW network in the autumn of 2024. That was announced during the earnings call. There was some rumors about that earlier in the day. I think Mike Johnson had that of Pro Wrestling Insider. This will be, NXT is heading to the CW starting next fall. They are going, there's no indication right now whether they're going to be changing nights, if they're going to still continue on Tuesdays. I think CW right now has a pretty decent show on Tuesday nights, or possibly sports. I can't remember, please forgive me. And so it's not clear whether they will move, but they did get a rights increase for this. There's no specific information about the exact number, but varyingly reported anywhere between $25 to $35 million a year, which NXT was previously being paid by USA Network $15 million a year. So this could be as much as 1.7 times is I think what WrestleNomics had it as, to 2 times the amount of money per year that they've been getting, which is a pretty significant increase for them. I think there's some argument that NXT was not really a money-making enterprise for WWE. They were kind of, I don't even think they were breaking even. But the interesting thing about this to me that jumped out, and there's been varying opinions about this. Some folks have seen this as a grand slam, spectacular move for WWE, great for NXT. Some folks have been like, yeah, it seems okay. It's a lateral move at best. The interesting thing to me was that USA has a right to match offers for Raw and NXT. So if if they'd wanted to keep NXT, they would have been able to do it, but they would have had to have paid the money that the CW offered. They did not do that, which I think is kind of fascinating to me, that they don't see a value to NXT, despite the fact that NXT's ratings have significantly improved, probably over about the last 6 months. I think they really hit their nadir in September of 2022. September 2021, which is when they changed from Black and Gold NXT to the NXT 2.0. And the ratings really hit a low, but they've steadily come back, and I think the integration of main roster WWE stars into NXT storylines has made a big difference with this. So, Trish, what are your thoughts about NXT heading to the CW? Do you see this as a home run for WWE?
I don't know about home run. I think that might be... I read a couple of the things that did say that, and I think that's probably overdoing it because there's so many things that are very unpredictable. So CW, essentially, people are categorizing it as a broadcast, so as a linear, I'm not sure, by the aerial kind of channel. However, in most part, as an actual channel, it's more of a cable channel than it is actually a linear broadcast. So yes, you can get it for an aerial, but you are probably doing that through a CW affiliate that is showing content from CW during the primetime hours and also has shown content in other hours. So prime example is Live Golf. Live Golf, is on they don't pay for Live Golf, and Live Golf don't pay them. And there's some sort of split around the ad rates. But we've seen examples this year of Live Golf actually being kicked off CW affiliate programming and replaced with other things because it doesn't do great numbers.
Right.
So the idea that it's going to be in so many more houses, I'm not so sure about that. They've actually kind of got similar reaches in terms of as a cable channel or as a channel itself. And then it's the same with viewership. So, people say USA is... a more popular channel has a higher average, but average is driven very much by Raw and lately, additionally by NXT. So they probably have similar viewership levels. The idea around that is that as cord cutting becomes kind of a more popular thing to do, and especially, but people aren't adding cords, I guess. So in 18 to 34, which is one of the target demos that NXT have targeted this year, and have made a big deal about wanting to beat Dynamite in, in that demo particularly, people aren't adding cable subscriptions. They aren't starting with cable subscriptions. So if it's then available through other means, whether it's adding an aerial or through the app, so CW has an app, then they're more likely to pick up that content in that way than they are to add cable. So I think that's where you could say that it's an improvement for them. However, to me, it does feel like more of a linear move. The important thing for TKO and for WWE is that they are being paid more.
Yes.
So it is a 1.7 increase. If it's from 15 million, it takes them to 25. I know Sports Business Journal, and PW Insider were given kind of 35 to 37. We don't know how realistic it is. They haven't released any data on that. But for their shareholders, everything has to increase in content value because the whole thing is about driving increased profitability. And in that case, they have gone from, if we look at May, kind of all the way through from December 22 to May 2023, you've kind of got averages of 0.14 to 0.16. You then stick the main roster people on, starting in June, you go from 0.18 all the way up to October, which averages 0.23. So that kind of influx of main roster has increased that average and probably has increased that value. And the big thing with USA is, so, people sort of said this around SmackDown. So they said, okay, so SmackDown is a linear channel, a broadcast channel. They rely on ad rates. They do not need carriage fees. Not everybody has access to Fox, right?
Yes.
So Fox needed, they were paying $4 million per show. They were receiving $2 million per show in ad rates. That's never going to be worthwhile for them because that's their sole income for that channel.
Yes.
Whereas USA, yes, they have ad rates, but they also need carriage fees. So the average for them channels is important in what it offers, and that's why keeping some sort of WWE content was important. And they've already done that with SmackDown. So they took the gamble with SmackDown in the fact that they thought that Raw may draw like more of a bidding war because of how long it's a over 30-year-old program. It might cause more of a bidding war. So therefore, if you take SmackDown at this reduced rate and you know what you're getting, you have 2 hours of content that could become 3 hours of content, could move any day of the week. Looks like it's going to run live from coast to coast. That was something else that came out of the conference call.
Yeah, that I find fascinating because that sort of suggests that WWE thinks that SmackDown is almost like live sports in a way, right? So what this means is that WWE is going to show SmackDown on whatever night they choose to show it on, and it'll be live throughout the country. So on the West Coast, it will start at 5 p.m., as opposed to right now where it's on a delay and it's treated like an entertainment show and it starts at 8 p.m., although if you can get a feed of it, I don't know what they do in California, I have to be honest with you. But it's sort of, Meltzer talked about this a little bit this week, where essentially they're treating it like it's a sports show, which they haven't done before. And it's going to be fascinating because I think the question is whether or not the audience is going to view it as a sports show, or if they're going to bother just turning it off because, they know what's going to happen. I don't know. I'm sort of interested in this piece of this.
I think it helps with synergy. So if you've got UFC and you have WWE, if you're promoting them, and they're talking about, sponsorship deals being cross-promotion, they're talking about location deals for pay-per-views and things being cross-promotion. So if you can kind of present them both as kind of, closer, WWE closer as mixed martial arts, it's not. We all know it's not. But you present it in that way. And, we've seen this with the way people were talking about WWE and Saudi Arabia's relations and how that's being presented as their kind of jaunt into sport. So there's already that kind of language in place. And then for this, the key thing around that is that CW are making a big kind of run at sport content.
Yes.
We talked about Live Golf. They've got NASCAR coming in 2025 for the Infinity Series, which is a big money deal that will have 31 races a year, which is 2 qualifying, a practice, and a race. So that's a huge amount of hours across the weekend, which probably eliminates the weekends, by the way.
Yes.
For NXT. So if anyone thought they're going to run Saturday or anything like that, and that was always so highly unlikely because there's going to be an NBC specials as part of the SmackDown deal, but that's definitely not going to happen. You've got too much content with NASCAR, with Live Golf, that there's no way they're going to run on CW on the weekends. Yeah, you said Tuesday night they have Inside the NFL.
Yes,
that
thank
is
you.
their Tuesday night program. So, that's at 9 p.m. I think currently. So you could move that later, earlier, but the NFL is always going to be the decision maker in that. The NFL are the strongest force in sports media, so it's unlikely that you're going to leave it there. Then they have college football, college basketball. College basketball moves around. College football tends to be Thursday, Friday, Thursday at the very few, but lower levels, but definitely on the Friday, and it's a Saturday. So mainly Friday for them. So you are looking at limited kind of days, and they'll want to fit that in with what they're doing with their SmackDown programming and what they do with their Raw programming.
Yep.
So, but for CW, it's this thing of, we are a force within sports. We are providing this amount of content, much higher level of sports content than we were previously. So it's allowing them to build the network by using kind of smaller media properties. And it's been said that they were interested in wrestling, that they looked at Ring of Honor, which was never going to happen because Tony Khan's not going to be able to negotiate with another network. And that makes absolutely sense. The best chance they have of a big renewal is to stay and honor the exclusivity with Warner Brothers Discovery. So that was never going to happen. They looked at other projects, and then, there's been stories around the NWA. There's so much.
Trish, I have to recap this because it's just so beautiful, right?
Oh my, go on.
So the NWA, there was a lot of rumors around the October 31st pay-per-view for the NWA that the NWA was going to start airing on the CW. A lot of backstage rumors amongst talent. Different outlets were reporting this. During the pay-per-view that NWA did on Halloween, and I'm going to mispronounce it, my Irish ancestors are furious, Samhain, they ended up doing a cocaine spot. Where wrestlers snorted cocaine during the pay-per-view. And all of a sudden the next day, there were a ton of stories about how the CW was furious about this and that it had jeopardized, if not straight out canceled, their television deal to show NWA Tight TV on the CW. So, of course, 3 days after that, it comes out that the NXT is going to be on the CW, which there were a bunch of people who were like, well, the WWE jumped on this. The timeline for these negotiations for these television properties are such that there is no way that in the space of 4 days, WWE was able to negotiate for one of its larger properties and millions of dollars worth of deal, right? What clearly happened, and based on and this is what you alluded to with Ring of Honor, there was a story that came out later this week about from House of Wrestling that at a party after the Los Angeles shows for AEW in June of 2022, Tony Khan was approached by people from the CW, executives from the CW, who were interested in taking Ring of Honor to the CW. And that didn't happen. So what's clear from this story is that CW has been interested in a wrestling property for some time, as you said. And they talked about Ring of Honor. They were looking into NWA. And that sort of makes you question whether or not WWE heard this and sort of threw NXT at them, right? Because I think this comes to an interesting question is in terms of like the future of the rest of it. Would WWE have seen it as a failure if NXT was not on broadcast television, if it went to straight streaming, which I think was a conversation point after the deal with for SmackDown, whether or not anybody was going to want NXT, right? And, there's been a lot of conversation lately about what the future for Raw is, right? Where's Raw going to go, right? SmackDown's going to USA. USA chose not to bid on NXT. NXT's going to the CW. And I think this week in The Observer, Meltzer said that the number one rumored location for that is the Disney property, which would air it on the FX network, right? The other thing that's been discussed is Amazon in terms of putting it on as a straight streamer. But we talked about this a few weeks ago, where the fascinating piece about this is that the TKO is owned by shareholders. They have to, as you said earlier, they have to go for the biggest money deal they have available, whether it makes sense for them long term or not. And I think from a business outlook, this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because I think we've talked about Raw is showing some slight signs of softening in terms of its audience, both its television ratings, its ticket sales. These are down a little bit. Not huge by any means, but if you compare them year over year to where they were the last time they came around, there's a touch of softening. SmackDown is still going crazy strong. right? How much of that is due to SmackDown still being on Fox and having that greater grasp and that larger rating? When SmackDown does eventually move to USA, are they able to sell the tickets the way they have been? I don't know. I find a lot of this stuff, what's going on with WWE the next year is going to be so interesting, and there's so many possibilities here. And, just to kind of wrap it up before I throw it back to you, one of the things that was so fascinating was Meltzer talking about he did a whole segment about the earnings call, and it was almost like an elegy for WWE, because he was like, they just talked about business. They didn't talk about angles. They didn't talk about what they're going to do in the future. They didn't discuss, like individual numbers for individual events. They're not going to be presenting those on the earnings call anymore. It's basically going to be very similar to what happened when Endeavor took over UFC, which he sort of seemed to feel very sadly about. But I do find that to be, if this is the case, and Endeavor is approaching this as a straight business property, like you said, that's a switch. Vince McMahon always viewed WWE as a wrestling property, which is different than a straight business. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a business. He wanted to control it. He wanted to own it, but it wasn't just a business for him in the way it's going to be for these guys. So, I like I said, just threw a ton of stuff at you. That's why I love this topic.
We've got the additional thing. So USA and NBC having money freed up this past week, to potentially go after the NBA.
Yes.
And the NBA are doing so you think about what WWE did with NXT, bringing the main roster in, using them stories to bring people in that maybe you don't watch NXT, and then hope that you hook people into the stories that were on NXT and they stay. And that's probably the test of the next couple of months, is to see whether that does sustain at the numbers that they were doing with that talent, if that talent is now taken away. We know we haven't got Becky Lynch on the show anymore.
Right.
We don't know who else is going to come in and out. But if they are looking, and the thing about that is it's twofold. So they've been able to do that because Raw and SmackDown are so strong. What we're seeing potentially with AEW, in a way, is that they protect the Dynamite number sometimes by not putting everybody on Rampage and Collision.
Yeah.
And you're doing that because you're going against competition. And one of the bigger competition this year is that the NBA is running an in-season tournament for the next couple of months.
Yep.
And that's huge competition that's going to be at a higher level than it was previously. And there's also additional higher interest in the NBA this year anyway, with certain new players and that sort of thing. So you've got that to kind of measure up against, but that is going to direct traffic in terms of who goes where and who goes on what night. And it seems pretty clear that for USA, once they tied up SmackDown at the rate that they did, then that leaves them freedom to go after the NBA, which seems to be the highest priority for these networks that they're at currently. The other interesting thing, so Dave was actually mortified that they're not going to do like split downs of tickets and that sort of thing. And so that their era is definitely over. The idea of having all this information around WWE and all this kind of not transparency, because
no, they've never been transparent.
No, that's the wrong word, but maybe more transparency than what we're going to get now.
Yes.
So under TKO, and it's what I found really interesting was there wasn't a wrestling voice.
No.
That's cool.
Yes. It was Nick Khan, Ari Emanuel, and I think it was somebody else on the call, but there was nobody from WWE.
Mark Shapiro, I think.
Yeah. Nobody from WWE as we know it. No Triple H, no Vince McMahon, no Stephanie, although obviously there would be no Stephanie. But that is really fascinating. And again, sort of pushes back to what I said about them sort of viewing it as a business, right? Like the wrestling piece of it is not important. It's the business pieces that are important.
Yeah, and the thing around so we talked earlier, I mentioned around the advertising around the issues with Fox, and there is a thing that they are looking to overcome, that wrestling is still viewed in terms of advertisers and networks as lower than UFC.
Yes.
And lower than other sports. So if you recategorize it as a sport and closer to that, can you gain, a better level of advertising money per half minute, per advert. So that may be one of the reasons why you would do that. The other thing is that I think there's a real kind of, what's the word? There's a real ambition for a lot of different kind of sports leagues, a lot of different kind of entertainment content, of ensuring your content is split between linear, cable, dish, whatever you want to call it, and streaming. So, I was discussing this just in our house for what's going on in the UK. So we're seeing linear broadcasting networks like BBC and ITV in the UK picking up more sports content that they wouldn't have had access to 3-4 years ago because all the money was in cable or in dish with Sky, BT, which is now TNT here. That's confusing. TNT show WWE here. Let's get that around.
Yes.
It gets around your head. But no, we are seeing a movement now of them picking up more sports content because the sports, so whether it's cricket we see it with, or whether we see it with women's football, or anything really at the moment, the idea is that they're all hedging their bets, not knowing where the kind of the future of broadcasting and is going to go. So we now have this split. So we'll see 100 cricket on the BBC, on Sky, and on streaming. The same with women's football. There's a big US deal just gone in for the Women's League over there as well, and it's a similar thing. So. And, David Zaslav on the Warner Brothers call said that streaming advertising is the money's been moved over there is now increased by, I think it was 40% this year.
Yeah.
So you're seeing advertisers react in the same way. So there's so much of kind of hedging bets right now. But the key seems to be that if you could, the way that you're going to keep your audience or grow your audience is to be able to platform yourself across all the platforms rather than just on one.
The thing about NXT with the main roster stars, right? This is where I think it touches back to Vince McMahon to some degree being a hindrance rather than a help. And where I think, right, like that's such an obvious idea that it's kind of weird that they didn't do it until just this year. Right? Like, that's such an obvious idea. Let's put some, and again, I understand that they did it at different times, right? But I don't think consistently they've had people on the network, on NXT, the way that they did over the last year, or the last 6 months, I guess I would say. Making Becky Lynch, I think even at one point Dolph Ziggler was a NXT title holder, right? Like, they made a commitment that this is going to finally truly be the third brand that it wasn't during the Wednesday Night Wars. And that's the kind of thing where it's, like I said, it's so obvious that you wonder why they didn't think of it, unless it was one of those things where it's like, this isn't my, that sort of sense from Vince McMahon that this isn't mine, and I'm therefore, I don't care for it. I don't know. This is a bit off topic, but it's just, that's where I think there are going to be things that TKO are going to do that are probably not going to be to the betterment of wrestling itself, but there may be things that they do that are to the betterment of wrestling, just because I think everybody lived for so many years with Vince McMahon just making crazy decisions, right?
And one of the most interesting ones, so it's maybe not obvious straight away because of how it would be advertised in terms of when you look up TV guys and that, is Women of Wrestling. Wow. Is so you'll see it as advertised on being on the CBS Media Viacom channels or on Vice. But some of the channels that are shown on are actually CW affiliates.
Yes.
So they are channels that get CW content in prime time. And also the show is available on the CW app. So this will be the first time in a very, very long time that there will be wrestling, essentially competition, on the same platform as WWE.
Yep.
And that is a huge change, and we're still seeing, he's not saying, and maybe some of that's to do with like the lawsuits and that are facing WWE and UFC in terms of competition, but that's a huge change that I think that probably would never have happened under Vince McMahon to allow that to happen. And it's the same, seems to be no hindrance on having the NWA if they don't scupper themselves on the app as well. So that is a huge, huge difference. And you can potentially say, the Women of Wrestling show is not well advertised within wrestling media. It's not talked about within a lot of kind of wrestling fans. So, and it's a very, it's a product, all about women. It's probably more targeted towards men because that's the huge secret about women's wrestling. It's mostly it's men that watch it.
Yep.
Which we'll talk about maybe in a little bit as well. But so you maybe have some crossover with a brand like NXT, which is more kind of women match heavy, or features more women, maybe more an accurate description than other products. And then the other thing with that as well is, is that a positive change? Is that not? Does it mean anything if they're still trying to kind of undercut AEW and other competition, through live events or other things that they do for time? I don't know. But I guess it's just an interesting point, and then we'll see what that kind of develops into. But for the moment, I think it's a very much a linear move that pleases their shareholders, increases their profitability, which is what all this is all about now. And yeah, the rest is pretty much uncertain. We'll see if it helps their viewership, hinders their viewership, how much their viewership will hold on with the roster as it is current. And will they send, difference makers there still? Because that's a difference. They were sending Dolph Ziggler, they were sending Finn Balor, they sent Adam Copeland, 0.16. That was a joke for quite some time. So will they send difference makers? And that was a difference when they sent Becky Lynch, when they sent Seth Rollins, when they sent Dominic Mysterio, who is hot right now, no matter how we all have no idea how.
No, he is.
Rhea Ripley, really, really kind of strong in terms of rating performance. So are they going to continue to send those people, or are they going to focus on trying to get Raw's value up now that deal is secured, because that's their next kind of product that's on the line, and that's the one that they need to maximise the numbers for, especially coming out the NFL season in January.
Oh, yeah. So. I think this is, I think I feel the same as you. I think this is pretty much just a lateral move. I have a hard time viewing this as a giant grand slam, but I appreciate that that's the, conversation as to around it, and, this is, going to be bad news for AEW and all this other stuff, but the CW is I don't know. Listen, I think this is one of those things that the WWE can spin it as a great move, right? There's things about it that it can be, and that for them is as important as anything else. And like I said, I think this is where them having to put NXT on a streaming service would have viewed that as a downgrade. So, like you said, we'll see where this plays out, and where we'll go. One other interesting piece of information that came out of the SEC call was Vince McMahon selling shares of his stock, which people jumped on as like, oh my God, he wants out. But the reality is that the way this is set up, this was almost certainly in place long before TKO merged, or WWE and UFC merged to form TKO, just based on the language and the way they organized it. It does appear to be sort of a payoff for him. But essentially, he's going to sell enough 700 million-ish shares of his stock. He will still have an absolute butt ton of stock available. He will still be the largest voting shareholder or whatever. And, there's some specific rules. WrestleNomics covered this very well today, the specific rules around how Vince McMahon can sell his shares. And I think I mentioned this on another show, there's usually when you have a merger like this, there's a moratorium for the people who own stock on how long they have to go before they can sell it. This was something Ari Emanuel talked in a interview about, how this was the uncertainty around the TKO stock price, was the fact that Vince McMahon did not have a moratorium on how much he could sell it, when he could sell his stock. So there's still some interesting stuff going around over there. And Vince does appear to be still involved. Dana White was giving him a ton of credit for helping with the Saudi deal for UFC. So we're going to see what happens. WWE continuing to bring us the kind of business-related content that we know our listeners are thirsty for.
When we started this, I don't think we thought we'd do so much WWE content, and then it's just kind of all fell into place.
Hey, it's like I say in the opener. It's what we find interesting. We hope you do too. Yeah. All right, so moving on, we are going to do similar to what we did last week, because Trish and I really enjoyed this format, right? So we're going to do similar, like last week we had narrative incoherence as our umbrella topic that covered a bunch of topics. This week we're going to have as our umbrella topic, is AEW still a challenger brand, right? Challenger brand thing was something that was discussed a lot. Tony Khan talked at one time extensively about how Warner Brothers Discovery wanted him to present AEW as a challenger brand. brand and think of AEW as a challenger brand. And that kind of got me thinking a little bit of like, well, how do you define a challenger brand? And as one does in 2023, I turned to Google. Which pointed me to a lovely website called the Challenger Project, which was founded by a man named Adam Morgan, who wrote a book about challenger brands. And this is what he wrote about challenger brands, which I thought sort of was very succinct, and I liked it. So I'm going to read it, folks, so you can understand what we're talking about when we talk about a challenger brand. So, according to Adam Morgan, a challenger brand is defined primarily by a mindset. It has business ambitions bigger than its conventional resources and is prepared to do something bold, usually against existing conventions or codes of the category, to break through. While the most common narrative associated with the challenger brand is that of an underdog, that is no longer the most frequent form of challenger. Challenger brands today are often more focused on what they are challenging, about the category drivers or the customer experience, for example, than who they are challenging. Being a challenger brand today is often about a mission-driven desire to progress the category, aka the business, in some way in the customer's favor. There are considerable strategic and cultural advantages in being a challenger brand. We don't have to be all things to all people. We can choose a place to stand and something to believe in. We can focus on brilliantly delivering that and that alone. Challengers are by definition not the number one brand, nor are they niche. This is the words of Adam Morgan, like I said, the Challenger Project. He had a little bit more to say about it, but that was the stuff I thought cut to the heart of what it was, and really kind of spoke to me in terms of like thinking about AEW, right? And thinking about some of the ways in which the narrative around AEW has changed in the last 6-ish months or so, albeit I think Trish and I would argue that the actual narrative changed a year and a half ago. It's just people are talking about it now. It was hidden by some other stuff going on. So, the first sub-topic in the umbrella topic of the challenger brand revolves... Yeah, go ahead.
You can't see me laughing, but I'm going to tell you why. And I am laughing. It's because we haven't gone through to detail what we were going to do here, but you've picked exactly the same website and exactly the same tone as I did. That's pretty magic.
There's a reason we do this podcast together, and it's because despite the fact that we live in completely different countries and have extremely different personalities, Trish and I share one brain.
One brain.
One tiny malformed wrestling brain.
So I kind of, I guess I popped for that a little bit. But yeah, let's go.
Okay, so the first topic under the umbrella topics is going to be our boy, Hangman Adam Page, and the art of the babyface, right? The babyface making you care about him or her and how they do it, right? So Trish, I'm just going to throw it on over to you after that lengthy introduction. Give us your thoughts.
So the reason why we're doing this in terms of being a challenger brand is one of the key things that AEW did very well in their first few years was they kind of rediscovered, for the Western audience, I'd say, how to present a babyface.
Yes.
So we had decades of, especially, 2010s especially, of WWE not being able to present a babyface and presenting their audience with constant disappointment.
Yes.
So if you want to talk about, most prominent example, Bryan Danielson. Yeah? And we're gonna repeat these names in a bit because I have reason for this. Then you had Jon Moxley. Wasted, underutilized babyface, ended up turning heel, ended up leaving the company. Okay. You can go further back. You can look at Chris Jericho. Ended up going heel, never worked out, had some good runs, but at the end of the day, did his best work once he left there. And you can name, Dolph Ziggler, another one you can name. There's tons of them. So there was this whole kind of decade of not presenting babyfaces strong enough, trying to push a babyface too much to the point of exhaustion of the fan base with Roman Reigns, who is a naturally better heel. And this was kind of a thing. So, there's this thing, right? People say AEW is WWE-like now. And one of the core things for me is, it drives me insane because they'll point out things. And, okay, you can say the presentation is similar, and that's probably more TV network controlled. Fine, I can live with that.
Right.
But when you say, oh, they're using, and you can say, oh, they're doing matches with, like the acclaimed Dalton and the Boys, it's just, oh, we've got a title match now. And that's a WWE trope. Yes, it is. But you know what it is? It's bad booking.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yes.
It doesn't matter that it was in WWE. It doesn't matter if it was in New Japan using House of Torture. It doesn't matter who it was with. It's just bad booking.
Yes.
And we seem to, and especially people that maybe aren't watching currently with WWE, seem to just associate the word WWE with bad booking.
Right.
Or things they don't like, or things that, disappoint them. And actually, that's what we should talk about, is actually, I don't really care. I don't really care what WWE have done. My big issue when we talk about this, and I'm going to throw a couple of examples at the Max Jay White program, just in terms of baby faces before we talk about Hangman, just to show that, and we could do this with Orange Cassidy and John Moxley, we could do this with Kenny Omega and the Takeshita thing or anything else. I could do this with practically every program in AEW, but we'll just pick these ones, right? So with Max at the moment, you have a babyface that kind of hasn't found his kind of road yet. So instead of that, he's using every tool in the box. Heel, face, every tool in the box. But what they do with their babyface now, so rather than traditionally in AEW, we've had babyfaces with depth, babyfaces who kind of have a niche, maybe who push the kind of the storytelling, who are doing things differently. And that's how they connect with the crowd. He's playing more of a John Cena kind of 20... I keep saying this, people hate it, I don't care. That's what it looks like and feels like to me. And this week made me feel exactly the same with the Garcia thing, because it was like, subtlety hammer, we're promoting youth. Well, that's not how you promote youth, and we'll maybe talk about that in a bit. You promote youth by literally bringing them up and into your main event or into your upper card. You don't just, stick them in a 10-minute title match and go, hey, we got youth. Subtlety hammer and all that stuff. But the big thing is for him was you can do things as a babyface that hurt other babyfaces, but also hurt your own programs.
Yes.
So, he cut promo on Jay White on Collision the other week, and he said, and I got a message from somebody in the rival company who said, how the fuck did this air? Because that's kind of the feeling on it. Was he basically said, if you search you on Google Trends, we won't find you're a nobody. And you're telling your babyface world champion who needs adversity.
Yep.
Okay, so you buy into a babyface because they have adversity or they have a goal that they need to reach. That's it. That's the only two reasons anyone buys into a babyface. They have a goal. So like Tetsuya Naito, I want to do the roll call at the Tokyo Dome in front of everybody. And he tells people everywhere, all the time. So even when you don't believe the booker, even when you think he's not winning and you think you've given up hope, he keeps telling you to believe, and people do because they have that connection with him.
Yes.
So he has that goal. And then you need adversity. And that's the thing. So if we talk about John Cena, what did they do? They kept giving him like huge guys to work with or people that would be believable as a threat to him. So, but when you're a babyface, if you do that, if you say to someone, somebody's a nobody, this is a Chris Jericho rule, right? They are, you say they're a nobody, well then you just beat a nobody. So then where's the adversity? So why does anybody care? And then they had to kind of come back from that this week and have, him say, he actually pinned me for 3 seconds because he lied about that in the promo as well. It's just bizarre. And then he goes, okay, and then he says, no one else has done that, which is actually a lie because Dax Harwood did, but we can all forget about that. That's fine.
Please. Please.
But then you have to have Jay White come back because otherwise you've buried Jay White and say, you only know your Google Trends because you search for yourself too much. You've now made that babyface world champion uncle, right? So this is where playing with all the toys in the box and not knowing your character can be difficult, and you give somebody too much.
But I just want to jump in here, Trish, because this thing with the promos, this happened on last night's Collision too, and it kind of irritated me because Big Bill did, or maybe it wasn't Collision, maybe it was Rampage. I can't remember. I watched them both back to back. Regardless, Big Bill, who did a great job on commentary, literally said, "We have known each other a week and we won the tag belts," and he was talking about himself and Ricky Starks. Right? We knew each other a week and we won the tag belts. Who could possibly beat us? And I was like, why would you say that? That just buries every tag team in your entire freaking division. It's just like, and like it did come across like a line someone gave him. And I'm just like, I don't know. This is this thing with some of these promos sometimes where I'm like, guys, like you have to think this through.
And this is the thing, so we'll get to Hangman in a bit, but we'll probably just talk about some general themes as well. So, in terms of tag teams, this is where the detail and the difference is. So I think the tag team division was one of the staples that made them a challenger brand at the start.
Yes.
Yeah, so they had a tag team division that was exciting. They put effort into their tag team division. They had some of the best talents in the world. Lucha Brothers, it's hard to remember now sometimes, but they were one of the most popular teams globally to come in. And then what they did was, so when you had a singles team go in like that, so like Big Bill and Ricky Starks, we had Kenny Omega and Hangman Page go in.
Yep.
What happened to their first match? Do you remember?
They lost.
They lost because they weren't a tag team.
Right.
So you told your audience that tag teams, because they work together, because of that, are on a level. So you can't just go in as the two singles guys and squash people.
No.
That you need to be on that level.
Right.
We're now in 2023, and the tag division has never been lower.
Never.
And we have, MJF beating tag teams in a handicap match like it's 2004 Triple H Raw, and we then have a makeshift tag team beating FTR in like 4 or 5 minutes. FTR saying, we're going to work our way back up, and all of a sudden they're going to title shot the next month. It's just a complete and utter mess, and that standard and that recognizable thing that made them different is gone.
Right.
And on top of that, you've got WWE looking at that and saying, okay, this is something that makes them different. How can we challenge that? Yep. And then successfully doing that by running, the Usos programs with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens and doing that sort of thing. And maybe that's not as strong as it was now. But they are still in a much stronger position than what they were in 2019.
Right.
So that's the thing about being a challenger brand, is then you have to change sometimes and you have to look at new things to make yourself different, because you will be challenged by the industry leader if they can kind of nullify these things.
Right.
And that's the same thing that they've done with the babyface. So you look at 2019, other than, I'd make an argument that Becky Lynch was still very popular. They did execute the turn of Becky Lynch from heel eventually, because they tried to fight it, as they tend to do. In 2018 to 2019, they executed that perfectly. She headlined WrestleMania. I went to the Rumble in 2019. She was the most over person I'd seen in years. By far. Like, the reaction to her winning was... I can't even compare it. Like, Seth Rollins were on late in the night and you wouldn't even thought anybody cared in comparison.
Right.
So they did execute that one. But in general, and we found this out with Seth Rollins later in the year by the time he lost to the Fiend match at Hell in a Cell, the notorious one. Yeah, they killed their baby faces in that year. They had nobody that was hot. Roman was staggering along and then they ran numerous baby faces after that, Drew McIntyre. No one really kind of was invested in their baby faces. And some of that is momentum. Because to me, the two key things around a baby face is, in terms of giving them momentum, is you need to hear them. Yes. Actually, it's free. I'm going to go with free. You need to hear them constantly, right? You need to see them wrestle a lot. And the other big thing is they need to be positioned well. So, you can have somebody, you can see and you can hear somebody, but if you position them poorly on the show or you don't show, support behind them, then people just won't have any belief in them. And where they changed was they got behind their baby faces. So they brought Cody in. He gets a huge introduction. He's got all the merch behind him, all the promotion behind him. And then his stories are, I get to talk, I tell you everything I think, I tell you to believe in me, I have the matches. And when I lose, and they've just done this with LA Knight as well, who I have no interest in, but... it does prove the point. So, they lose to Roman straight away. We're back kind of promo. We're back kind of rebuilding that belief in us.
Right.
And he did that straight away on Friday night. LA Knight has a match, has a promo, win, back up, and I'm going to go face Roman again.
Yes.
So you need that momentum. Look at, you see Mike Santana and Ortiz match. Yeah, they had that on Rampage a few weeks ago. Well, a little kind of executive feud just on Rampage. Where's Santana?
Nope. He's gone.
Yeah, he's gone. And, when we talk about baby faces and we talk about AEW, there's a difference. So there's this thing of, if you look at who they have on the babyface side now, and all of these have kind of been that, you've got people that are presented constantly, and you've got people that are not. So they kind of learned a little bit of it. We thought about it with Orange Cassidy. We had Orange Cassidy wrestle every single week for... most of the year. And
I think you could argue that started in January, and it picked up in January that he moved pretty much from being somewhat exclusive to Rampage, he came over onto Dynamite, and he was there every week until he lost the belt in September.
Yeah, and he felt stronger for it.
Yes.
Because he was a babyface that you knew you would see.
Yes.
And you also were hearing from him quite a bit as well. Yeah,
Yes.
especially in that second half of the reign, he was cutting little backstage promos, and even when his reign finished, he cut the promo in after Chicago.
Yes.
And then it stopped.
Yep.
And then he doesn't really cut so many promos. And then John Moxley is now directing the feud. And before that, before he had the match with Claudio was directing that bit.
Yep.
So we've seen that there. The thing about Hangman is that he's the most glaring example.
Yes.
And I think because he is, people consider him the protagonist of AEW for the first 3 years, he's always going to be the one that people look to. A friend of ours, said something that I thought was kind of enlightening the other day. They said, if you've got a catchphrase for WWE, what's their catchphrase? Is it then, now, forever?
Yep.
That's their catchphrase, okay? TNA would be like total non-stop action. And then AEW would be, where the fuck is Hangman? and I think it's quite accurate. And the funny thing is that, people think, they look at the Swerve Hangman program and they think, he's a made man, he's back on TV, it's great. Well, we're happy with him just being back on TV. Well, I tell you what, if people are happy with the way babyfaces are presented and the way that the kind of things, and they care and they're invested, it's not showing in any numbers.
No.
It's not showing in the numbers of the ratings, it's not showing in the numbers of live, which are okay. The live numbers are okay, but that's mostly because they've actually started to do some local promotion again for,
yes.
As we talked about in the very first episode, was an absolute necessary. Well, look, that's helping their numbers now. Helped them in Oakland. It helped them last week. Be really interesting to see who does promotion for Ontario and for LA. Mm-hmm. We'll leave that one as an aside for now. But I am very,
We'll circle back to that maybe next episode, Trish.
But I'm very, very intrigued by that one, I must admit. So that's kind of helping that. But there's also, in terms of YouTube numbers, YouTube numbers you have to be very careful with, because especially ex-WWE talent are very much driven by foreign viewership, especially India. And we see that with Adam Copeland, as we mentioned before, huge YouTube numbers, does nothing for TV. No. Practically. That's probably harsh, but you get my point. But that, the kind of use of that content is down, the interaction with that content is down. We're seeing that with other mediums. So, and especially, now we've talked about this because I know you track Collision numbers for female demos.
I do. I have been tracking the Collision female demos since Collision started. And let me tell you, that graph is one of my favorite things to look at, because that number just plummets.
Yeah.
The female demo for Collision, the 18 to 34 women have showed up for the first episode, came back twice after that, and then never watched the show again. That number drops every single week. Women 35 to 49 showed up the first week, showed up huge for Better Than You Bebe versus FTR. That was the highest rated female demo number for any episode of Collision. It was higher than the debut. And then they have dropped off. And when there's a WWE PLE, those women disappear in droves. It's fascinating. But the numbers in general are bleak. The women do not care about Collision. And we could get into this. May be a separate topic for another show, but I have a lot of thoughts on this.
So the thing about that, and the reason I bring it up, is also, the content that people engage in, and more traditionally women, when they care the most about the characters and about the product. So whether it be, and this was brought up by a friend of ours around, Archive of Our Own, the fan fiction site. So predominantly a woman interest, although there definitely are some male writers, has dropped huge in terms of content around AEW.
Yes.
So this all suggests, and Dave pointed out, I think, on War today, that that's where their main drops are coming. Their main drops are coming in women, and women tend to be more character focused, tend to be more invested in things, and tend to walk away when they're disappointed or that cast change, or that recipe changes. So I always bring up Walking Dead. Walking Dead, they lost 2 or 3 main characters later on in the series. Game of Thrones is similar on this, and all of a sudden, that was the demos that you need to watch. They're like the canary in the coal mine demos.
Yes,
and this happens to be, so 18 to 34 is where WWE are gaining. And that's because they're doing kind of that story content, and people were invested in the baby faces, and the baby faces are fresh, they are young, and they're attractive to their audience. And this is where we get back to Adam Page. So Adam Page is a draw in the younger demos.
Yes.
He's attracted to that demo because they associate with him. And let's be frank, because New Japan made a ton of money out of this, and Noah made a ton of money out of Axis before Nakajima left. You know, he is a attractive male with that softer element, that storied element, similar to kind of how they present Thor in the Marvel films. And that is always going to be attractive to that demo. But this is a guy that is a fantastic storyteller, but also protects his character. And actually, what we've seen since Wrestle Dream, and we'll talk about wider in a minute, because there's some themes to kind of talk about. But what we've seen is kind of that kind of narrative incoherence that we talked about last week.
Yep.
Kind of resonate and kind of really affect how you view a babyface. Right, so I'm going to run through. Do you remember we did the FTR thing last week, and you ran through like everything that happened?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. So you do the first part of the program, and the first part of the program was pretty successful.
Yes.
You know, they had good spots. They were in top of the hour. They were closing shows. There was a mixture of kind of focus because Max was doing his Ring of Honor thing and whatever that was, and doing the Samoa Joe thing. That meant for Wrestle Dream, with Danielson and Sabre not really being built at all, it left most of the focus on Swerve and Hangman, which hasn't happened for a very long time.
No.
You know, they did 2 in-ring promos, one where, you know, he kind of allowed some of his frustrations and some of other people's frustrations for him, around him, to be used by Swerve, and they didn't do an answer because that was his position. And this is what he is clever at. So he will build these things into his character rather than using in other ways, and we'll talk about that.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, and there was a couple of incoherent things. So, you know, they said, oh, you didn't earn your opportunities. And it's like, well, you know, the story in AEW is he earned everything, right? He earned it. Although that's kind of, someone tried to steal that and use that phrase and claim plausible deniability this year. But that's the whole thing of his character. He earns it. And you took that away, but you thought you can build that in later, and you could see how they were going to. But it also allowed him to highlight other things. And, you know, it's funny, everyone went on about the promo that he did with the rain cloud.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, it's all about Punk, it's all about Punk. And I'm just going to read, because I'm not getting myself in trouble, I'm just going to read what Brian Alvarez said, because it's just easier. Right? So he said, you know, he was explaining that he was in a deep depression because of everything involving CM Punk, and every time he felt better, Punk would say or do something that would ruin his day or ruin his month. Now Punk is gone and he's still around, and he's realised that he needs to be the old Hangman again for these fans. And that was what they said in the promo. And it's funny, isn't it? Because people look at him and they think he's been around constantly, but he's barely been around for the last 2 years. So we're doing this on the Sunday.
Yep.
And tomorrow is Monday. It's the 13th tomorrow, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's actually 2 years to the day since he won the title at Full Gear tomorrow. So this is kind of an interesting time period to discuss him. And you look at it, and he's moved backwards. So when he lost the belt, he didn't wrestle a match on Dynamite
Months
until Roosh on the anniversary show. No, Danielson, sorry. It's Danielson on the tournament show, the one that Jericho spoiled the result of before the match. When they filmed the pre-tape, which is because it's one of the weird little things that kind of always happen to him that doesn't happen to anybody else, but there we are. You know, so he didn't wrestle there. Then, you know, they do the concussion happens with John Moxley in that match, and then he comes back, he wrestles the singles matches, he has decent runs to there. Then that match happens afterwards. Moxley kind of uses it for his heel turn, but ends up feeling like the victor, even though it wasn't, and then he disappears again.
Right.
And this is like a common thing, so it kind of goes on through the year. So then you get to this point where you can cut these promos and he moves it into his character. But by that point, he has no momentum. So, you know, and you've got this situation where you've got these outside factors with the Punk thing, everything like that. And the fact he does not talk. And this is the thing. So, you know, he's talking about the depression and the mental health issues and everything that drove it. But he does not talk about that. He just uses it in character. Right. And there's this thing, right? There's this thing that people just say, oh, he has no drive, he has no influence, why does he, you know, want to do this, why doesn't he speak up?
Hangman wants to be a stay-at-home father is the one that makes me absolutely lose my fucking mind. Like, yes, a man is going to television every single week, a 30-year-old man who spent his entire career pushing as hard as he possibly could be, who is just content to stay at home with his kid, despite the fact that he shows up at television every week. You know, he doesn't want to be on TV anymore. Like, this is... continue, but this is the kind of BS that you and I are discussing when we talk about this stuff, right? These are the narratives that spring up around people who don't open their mouths and basically keep themselves quiet for the good of, you know what I mean? Like, anyway, go ahead. Sorry, before I get myself in trouble.
No, so he tells you through that promo some of the things he's been going through.
Yes.
And that's the first time he's been able to voice that. And for the last 18 months, he's had no voice, and he's had his brand damage. He's been called out as a coward on TV. You know, he had the stupid press conference stuff where they called him an idiot, and you know, everybody repeats that. He says nothing. You get to the stuff with the ESPN stuff, and he says nothing.
Yep.
Even after all that frustration of, you know, and, you know, there was times where you can say, oh, he was rewarded for his silence. You know, he got the match with John Moxley in Cincinnati because he didn't talk after the All Out stuff. And, you know, yeah, their contracts and, you know, the contract that him and everyone else in the Elite signed, you know, they all signed the same deal for the same amount of huge money. Part of that was silencing, you know, it was kind of, you keep quiet. But the thing is, everybody says, oh, he should shout, he should do this. Well, what benefit does that have to AEW? Right? So who's looking out for AEW? Would it be better for him if he went out and he said, you know what, I don't get any time on TV. I don't get to cut live promos. I've cut 5 live promos this year and had 2 occasions where I've had lines in others, and that's it. Is that good enough? No. Does that help me as a babyface? No. You know, when he had the Danielson program and he knew he needed to wrestle every week, and he knew that was the key for his title reign and being important spots in his title reign, and he just didn't kick up about it at all, even all the way through. Right. And people say, oh, you kicked up in a Punk promo. No, he didn't. That's a completely different thing. But did he do that? Would it benefited him to go into the press and run his mouth like CM Punk in 2012, 13 in WWE? Yes, it probably would have benefited him. Would it benefit AEW? No. Would it have benefited him to go on Instagram and post, you know, stupid shots, or go on Twitter and post like Danhausen is today? Like, where is Danhausen? Who cares? You're a goblin. I don't care. You know, you sell T-shirts. So did Zack Ryder. It doesn't change anything. You know, this is potential main eventers that we're talking about here, and this is why it's important. It doesn't benefit AEW for him to do that. It would benefit him. But even when the company have not shown him that loyalty, he shows the company that. And you can say he's compensated. I absolutely, you can make that argument, sure. You know, they compensated him money-wise and that sort of thing, and benefits. You know, they're all on, you know, they all have similar benefits. We can talk about the role of an EPP another day. But it doesn't benefit him doing what he's doing, but it does benefit the company. And even in this program, you know, I wish he was more selfish. I wish he was, but he's not. And for him, you know, the way he looks at it, I believe, and I've had, you know, a conversation with a few people this week around this, but it's, to him, it's as important to raise Swerve up to that next level.
Yes.
As it is for him to raise up. And I would argue for him, you know, at times I want him to look and go, you still need to be that guy, and other people need to kind of push that more for you. And there's some difficulties there. You know, there's been hints of talk about it, and people talk about, I'm going to get myself in trouble, screw it. You know, we talk about perception of, people talk about perception of elite fans as being parasocial, quote unquote. Right, we hate that word, don't we? But, you know, ironically, because they're pretty parasocial about somebody else. But they are very perceptive. And there was something in the summer that caught somebody's eye. And then when I kind of dug a bit more into it, it kind of was hinting at something. And, you know, I don't think it's a secret. And I think Dave's hinted at it when he was talking about them re-signing and why, you know, Hangman might be better going elsewhere. Is that, you know, his relationship with Tony Khan isn't perfect.
No.
Wasn't perfect during that period. And if you think it was, you don't need a rocket scientist to tell you, because you can see how he was sacrificed in some ways with the Punk thing, especially with the ESPN thing, which then killed their media relationship. So, you know, there's that frustration there. And that is supposedly getting better, and we'll talk about this slightly more in a minute, but there's still some work there. And this thing about he's a made man, well, does Tony see him that way? Or does he see him as a quote-unquote, and I'm stealing somebody's quote, B-plus player? How WWE saw Bryan Danielson or Jon Moxley.
This kind of touches a little bit, though, Trish, on maybe a larger topic, and I don't want to digress too much from the Hangman thing, but my thing that I've been questioning lately is who does Tony see as a made man, right? And it kind of goes back to the conversation we had about Kenny last week, where it's like all of a sudden we're going to present Kenny Omega as a big fucking deal, but we don't really do that on a week-to-week basis, right? Like, I think you could say that part of the reason why AEW is struggling right now is because of there's not that many people that Tony Khan sees as a made man or a big fucking deal, right? Like clearly it's MJF right now, right? Obviously. Clearly it's Moxley to a degree, although Moxley certainly has his periods where he just sort of disappears a little bit. And I think we're in one right now. Moxley has not wrestled a match on television since he had the concussion with Rey Fenix in September, right? He's had 5 matches for other promotions, but he hasn't had any for AEW, right? So, it's clearly Danielson. Obviously, we have Danielson on television last night telling us about a new tournament, right? But I think that's a big piece of it. And I think one of the things you touched on was where you talked about the number of times over the last year plus where it seemed like Hangman was on his way back, right? And I think that happened with the Moxley program. It happened when the Elite reunited. It seemed to me as a Hangman fan like, okay, Hangman's on his way back. We're finally going to recover from where we left off when Hangman lost the belt, right? And something always derails it. Right? Either it's derailed by injury or it's derailed by booking for somebody else or something else happens. And I just, like you said, this is endemic across the board with all of their baby faces, right? With the exception of MJF, none of their baby faces are getting enough time right now. Not Orange Cassidy, not Darby Allin, maybe Sting, but again, this is a complete deviation from where they've been with Sting for the last 4 years. Is now we're going to present Sting like he should be, like he's not a 62-year-old man. So, like, as you said, this harkens back to that criticism of WWE, and this is where I get frustrated when people are like, well, it's WWE, it's WWE. Why? Give me a reason as to what is going on right now in AEW that makes you say WWE, and I don't want to hear wacky comedy skits, because that's something AEW has always fucking done. Like, they've always done wacky comedy skits. Tell me what's going on. And I think the de-emphasis of the baby faces is the biggest thing you can point to in terms of how fucked up and weird the booking is right now, right? That this was something that they had as a goddamn lock for years. And it wasn't just Hangman that we were talking about. They presented Darby Allin, they presented Orange Cassidy, they presented Jon Moxley when he was a babyface. Yuta and his whole thing where he went to the BCC was a babyface arc that they executed perfectly, right? Why is that something they're no longer able to do successfully? It's frustrating because, again, it's not like this is a problem that they've shown they're not capable of doing, right? Like, you could argue that AEW has always struggled to elevate people to that top of the card. That's a consistent problem they've had since day one, fine, right? But the babyface thing is not. So where is this coming from?
Some of it is the elevation, so there is nowhere to elevate up to. Right? And this is where the saying with Swerve and stuff is kind of, we're getting a kind of some of that force as well. So you look at it this way. They had Jungle Boy. Okay, so Jungle Boy wins which we all didn't see coming. He won the Battle Royal Double or Nothing in 2021. Yep. And then straight away, a month later, they do a 4-week build. They run the Jungle Boy Kenny Omega title match. Yep. So there was, yes, he wasn't going to be at that level, but you have that run of that feeling of that elevation. We don't have that now. We don't have that movement. So if you have a babyface win now, well, where are they going? Right. They're not going to face Max. With Darby Allin, you have Darby Russell. You don't hear him talk so much. You put him against somebody like Christian, who's getting constant airtime, constant talking, constant story, constant matches. He got, Christian got cheered over him in Seattle. Yeah. Your baby phase. So people didn't care enough about Darby winning that belt back. Darby, who won the most successful TNT champions, who had a hugely successful run in 2021, in April, May 2021, as a babyface champion in terms of a ratings draw as well. That's the thing that you don't have. And last time we were on here, I said, who's better off in 2023 than they were in 2021? And I said, Darby's back. He's up higher now, and Orange Cassidy. And somebody messaged me and challenged me and said, they're just at the same level they were previously. They still hit the same ceiling, and, they've just been re-elevated to that level because they've been dropped. They're not any higher.
No.
And I found it difficult to argue with that. So there is a ceiling on that, and there's a stagnation on that. And some of that's caused by, so you have a victory for somebody young. So say, I don't know, we're talking heels here, but you talk, Takeshi beats Kenny Omega, yeah?
Right.
Then there's no elevation of him.
Right.
There's nowhere to him to go. Where does he go? There isn't anywhere to go. They can't break him through that stagnation in that main roster. Whereas if you and then he disappears for weeks at a time.
Right.
Powerhouse Hobbs, same feud, same thing happened. There's no follow-up in that aspect. So then when you have that with a babyface, it's much, much more challenging because you need to know that they are going somewhere.
Right.
You need to have some care in the fact that they are what they are aiming for. You need to understand their vision, what's their ambition. Why should you care about these people? Because that's the whole thing. When people discuss what's going on with AEW at the moment and they discuss... And I think some of it's because All In gave them like a WrestleMania feel and they had that kind of WrestleMania season. And then when that finished, people started to see some of these things that have been going on for so long, and it kind of all barrel rolled down until we got what happened the other week, which wasn't that bad an episode of Dynamite, but all of a sudden it was like we were in hell. But that's because all these things kind of build up, and then that episode was just this culmination of this feeling and this emotion, and people realizing that this isn't the same product, and it's not making me feel the same way. It's not making me feel like I need to not watch the NBA instead. It's not making me feel like I need to buy the pay-per-view, and conversion rates is something to probably keep an eye on because an audience can take a lot. WCW survived all of 98 and most of 99. They look at their conversion rates after the Think About It Poker Doom. But then it just falls off because they lose that care. And baby faces are what make you care. If you see a heel do something cool, you're just like, oh, he's a cool heel. That's great. Yeah, I wanted to see him do better. Do I care? No. And it's that thing I said with Max earlier. So, and you've got to care about the right things, right? So Max they do the tag match. He's supposed to want the belt back. The belt should be the most important thing. That's what he wants. Right. That tag match with the Acclaim doesn't become about the belt. No. It becomes about scissoring. And that's great. If you really want that moment, you want that friendship, that's great. But that doesn't get you heat on the heels that then sells you your pay-per-view match. Doesn't. No. And it doesn't get you... and then it doesn't get you to focus on the belt. And it drove me insane because it's like... The whole point is like... the dynamics are just shifted. They're not right. And that's the thing probably most with Max at the moment that you feel. And the bit that bugs me is that they have done this stuff better in the past, right? Yes. So, for example, that 8-man, perfect example. So bring it back to March 2020. Straight after Jon Moxley won the belt, he's supposed to team with Darby Allin against members of the Inner Circle. They take Moxley out, Darby's on his own. He starts the match on his own, he has that adversity. Eventually, Moxley makes his way back, you get that huge kind of pop, but then it's not enough, they get beaten down, you have huge heat on a heel, and that goes into the Hager and Moxley title match, and then what Darby's doing next. This was not that. They did the thing, he's got to find his friends, fine. He should have started that match alone and then be joined. Right. Then you have that adversity in the match. That doesn't happen. Instead, the reveal is an outfit. The gimmick. It's a gimmick. We basically put the focus on a gimmick and not the adversity. And it's the same with the finish. So actually, instead of Jay White, who, pins him clean and you should be standing over him, and that's your heat going into, your last couple of weeks, we're not doing that. So then we just chase him off and it's like, it's all about scissoring and the friendship thing, which is great. And that's, has its audience and that's a story point if you're invested in Max. But that makes you more invested in Max than invested in what happens to the title. And that's fine.
There's a cheapness to it lately that I am struggling with. And I say this as someone, and we disagreed on this program. Like, I felt like until All In, this program was going pretty well. Even All Out, I wasn't totally opposed to it. I thought, But I've said this, it doesn't work without Adam Cole physically there, because Adam Cole is what made MJF likable. And without Adam Cole there to make MJF likable, it just feels like he's doing whatever he can. And I think we've talked about this a little bit elsewhere, and I think this is something that is underappreciated as part of what the problem is. I think MJF's alignment change is fucking with him. I don't think he has a sense of what he's supposed to do. I don't think he understands what it is to be a babyface the way he understands what it is to be a heel. I don't think he studied babyfaces the way he studied heels. I think I can't say that it was a mistake for them to turn him face because I think the audience was desperate for it. But I think the way they chose to do it, it was Adam Cole is a linchpin. And no matter how many video chats you have with him, it doesn't work if he's not there. And the problem is that there's, we can talk about this in a little bit too, but there's no heels big enough to beat him up, right? Like, you said this about Jay White. They just haven't focused the feud on Jay White, which is ironic because every other feud in the goddamn promotion right now is focused around the heel, except for this one, which is, like you said, all about scissoring and this devil mask thing, which I struggle to care. And I think all of it is just tired right now. And I think this is the struggle with being at the very tail end of a year plus title reign. It's we're all tired of it. It's the same faces at the top of the card. It's the same feud going on for months. It's MJF in every segment of Dynamite, in half the segments of Collision and Rampage. I know that's an exaggeration, but that's what it feels like sometimes. And it's just, like you said last week, it's Marmite. If you're not into it, there's not a lot else on the bone there for you. Right? And it's frustrating when you see people that you're interested in. And part of the reason why I think the Hangman Swerve thing feels fresh is because Hangman also felt fresh. We didn't see Hangman for a long time. And when we did, he was in groups and he wasn't talking. And it's like, oh, hey, remember this guy? We like him. He usually has interesting things to say to us that most other wrestlers are not saying. Or he's thinking about the wrestling feud in a different way that some of the other people are. And that's super interesting. And part of what makes it a challenger brand is that other wrestling promotions don't have this, right? Other wrestling promotions don't have Darby Allin. Other wrestling promotions don't have Orange Cassidy, right? So why are we not focusing on them? Because I think you could argue that as a babyface, other promotions have MJF or have had him.
Yeah, and the thing is that, so the thing with Max is really simple to me, is that he wants to be everybody. So
yes.
He wants to be the authentic babyface that Hangman is. But he's not Hangman.
No.
And he doesn't have that depth to him, and he doesn't have that kind of, he can't induce that kind of realness that Adam Page does, and as much as they've tried to challenge that lately, he doesn't have that. And you don't need to do that. You don't see Kuchika Okada trying to be Tetsuya Naito.
No.
It was no point. And that's the funny thing is that with Naito, it's like Okada, when he comes to the US, is huge, but he's not the most popular babyface in Japan. You know, with Okada. He's not. He tails massively behind Tanahashi and Naito. And, who swap places as the most popular depending on the year. And the reason why that is because they have that connection, they have that kind of raw emotional connection with the crowd that Okada does not. Okada does not have an emotional connection with the crowd, but they understand that he's a great wrestler and a great champion. And that's his role. He doesn't need to be this emotional connection because we have others that can do that. And and this is the thing, so you can invest everything in Max, you can throw everything at him and say, this is just our guy, but it'll never be enough.
No.
It's never enough unless you have the other people that people were interested in. Because they did that with WWE. And what happened is we built an audience that was big enough to sustain New Japan and then to sustain AEW.
Right.
So it's like you are falling into the kind of the mistake that the others made that allowed you to become. And, so let's run down. I'm going to run down. So since WrestleDream, all right, this is the thing where people say, oh, it's nothing, or he's not being presented, he's been presented fine, and they built the feud fine. Okay, this is what they've done. And this is kind of a rundown of things that are happening with a lot of programs at the moment. So they do the match. The match is, really well structured, paced. They're both really happy with it, coming out of it from things I've been told. You use that build around his family. Okay, so you build that straight into the program very, very early on. You talk about his spot, and you mention, if he beats him, he deserves the world title. They build it around the world title and Swerve wanting to be the first African-American world champion. Straight after the match, they do a couple of quick promos on the week after. Then only Swerve cuts a promo the week after, and it's all like, into Title Tuesday, and they want to run. They're going to run TNT. So stupid. Oh. This was changed like 3 times beforehand, I believe. So there is other stuff that was involved in this. There has been a lot involved in this feud. The tag title stupidity has been involved in this.
Yes.
Stuff with the IC title, stuff with the world title. So there's been a lot of influences changing that, but it's all about how you react to it at the end of the day. And so they did, we're going to do a match for Danielson and Swerve for potential opportunity for the TNT title and Open Championship belt. As soon as you do that, you've downgraded the feud to TNT. That's it. You can't deny that. You can't say, it's still a world champion.
No.
And Hangman tried to kind of tie that up in his promo last night and try and find a way back and, and try and be clever with it. But that's how it looks. That's how it looks to people. And you profile, the spotlight on that program on Title Tuesday was on that first match. Because once you had the first match result, you knew the second one. So the spotlight is on Swerve with Danielson. And that's fine. There is nothing wrong with spotlighting Swerve. He's making the most out of his minutes. He's learning how to kind of work in that kind of main event style program. There was a reason why that their match at Wrestle Dream felt like the world title match when there wasn't one. So that's great. But you've got to be really careful when it comes to the balance of face and heel. You do the Jay White Hangman match. There's no promos from Hangman in the middle. There's no stakes.
Nope.
Huge mistake. Always a huge mistake with a babyface to have no stakes. Again, he's got nothing to chase for. And the funny thing was, is they actually did what they should have done this past week, right? So they had Daniel Garcia win a match. So, world title's really hard to get a match for. He won a match against Trent, and all of a sudden he challenged for the world title. That's got to stop. You've got to have stakes. You've got to have reasons for people to challenge. And there was no belt to challenge for, by the way, because we still haven't bothered to get that back. And there's no consequence of stealing belts.
I can't with the fucking belt. This is, at the very least, if you wanted to end the show on Wednesday night with Max feeling like, or the Wednesday before with Max feeling like he'd won something, don't pebble around the scissor. Build it around the fucking belt. Get Bowens or somebody to give him the belt back. And then he has a reason to be, super cheery with the, there's so many better ways to do this, and the fact that Jay White has to come out with the belt and for the freaking 6th week they have to explain, Jay White's not really the world champion. It's dumb. Sorry, I'm doing the thing that I'm
No.
It's dumb.
But this is another one. So they ran this angle last year and they ran it better.
Yes.
Right? So they had the belt stealing angle. They had Adam Cole steal it to prolong the feud with Hangman to keep his attention after he beat him at Revolution. Next week, Hangman is a smart babyface. He goes and gets some friends. He evens it up. He gets the belt back, and then the next week he punishes the heel and challenges to Texas Death.
Right.
And then you get that big baby face thing at the end. And they didn't promote that match well enough. It did pretty good considering what people think. It did really well, but people think it didn't. There we are.
No.
But, he has that huge baby face support in Garland. And interestingly, the only time they actually booed him is when he wouldn't actually kill Adam Cole near the end, so that was great. But that's something to look to with the Hangman character. But the whole point of that is they executed this story better. It's the same thing where we talked about with the 8-man. They have done this better themselves in the past, and that's the thing. So the comparison, I don't care about comparisons to what WWE do or what they do with their belt stories or Sami Zayn and Seth Rollins. I care about they were delivering a higher quality of story content themselves in the past that was more intellectual and made sense. That's it. Their storyline, we talked to hours about this last week, but that's it. I don't care about WWE. I care about and that's someone said, they're measured to a different standard. Yes, they're measured to their own standard, and that's the bit they're failing at.
Yes. They are measured to their own standard. They did do these things better. They did have title shots that made sense. They had, people winning matches. And again, I understand with the ratings and rankings and all this other bullshit. That is where so much of my frustration comes from. Not because I'm looking at the TV screen and going, it looks like WWE. I'm frustrated because there's a lack of stakes. There's a lack of the stuff that I fell in love with, the things that made sense on this show have gone away. And it doesn't seem to be a reason why. Yes. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. And if they'd done that at Title Tuesday, it would have been a better use of both anyway, especially of Max if they'd done the title match. The promo that he cut, it went from 600,000 to 637,000. He's not John Cena, and sometimes I think he has to accept that too. Whereas, they ran the Kenny Omega MJF match on a Collision, which is going to attract a lot less, and that match gained 100,000 viewers. Which one would have been more successful in that spot? Max should have been wrestling. They could have done the Swerve thing, and then you have Hangman costume, and then you can say, well, you didn't earn it like I did. Right. Easy line, real easy line.
Right.
Then you have enough for Swerve to be agitated by? Is losing a TNT title shot that he could probably go and challenge for tomorrow enough to be agitated, to do a home invasion? No. So you've lost that kind of sense into that. You've lost that motivation. I don't feel that motivation strong enough, but it could have been. And then, with the Hangman J stuff, there was no stakes. This week they did stakes with Mark Briscoe. He cut 2 promos, one on Collision, one on Dynamite. Actually asked for different things. One was to be added to the match at Full Gear and one was to take his spot. But that's the sort of detail that we're kind of getting used to now.
At this point, I'll take small gains.
We'll take small gains. But he got to cut 2 babyface promos in the build-up that shows his motivation, his stakes, and then they do better out the main event than what they have done for previous main events, right? They don't do that with Hangman. He doesn't have a voice in this. He doesn't have a role in this. He's just there. And he comes out of that. There's no promo for him coming out of that. There's a promo for Swerve the following week. He's just like, oh, I'm just going to defend the Ring of Honor belts because that's all I've got to do. There's no like kind of annoyance by what happened or anything.
Right. Frustration.
You don't give that babyface that opportunity, but you're giving the heel that opportunity. So which person is the crowd going to get behind? Which person is people going to be more invested in? They're going to be invested in, this is how it is these days. They're invested in who they see. It's not the same as it was. You can't play the same games that you did 10, 15 years ago. And you can look at it and say, well, Hangman got away with it. He was still over when, he was world champion. They were doing this too. Yeah, he was over. His booking wasn't over, he was over. And sometimes that's what it is with Max as well. It's like, you're over. So some of these things you do, you're getting away with, but they will catch up with you.
Well, this is where it's again, and this is the stuff with Max where I say, like I said, I don't think he understands his alignment fully. It's almost Cody-esque, to be completely honest with you. It's giving me like Cody in December, January 2022. Like, I'm chasing the cheers, right? I want them to cheer for me. They will cheer for me in specific things. I'm not realizing the long-term damage I'm doing to my own character by chasing these cheers the way that I am, right? Because with Cody, it was like, this is why they're not rooting for you, buddy. It's because they want you to turn heel and you're refusing to do it. Anyway, that's a digression for another time, but...
Oh, so then you have... So you do the week where you're going to do the House Invasion, and you have Hangman and the Bucks defend the belts against... It was Brothers A and the Hardys? Yeah, so opponents that people weren't excited about. You could have done like Dalton Castle and the Boys, and it probably would have done better than that, but there we are. But you do that, and he has no annoyance. He's just wrestling a regular match.
Yep.
And... I said last week I'd like Ring of Honor to just kind of disappear from television, and it kind of has in a weird way in a couple of weeks. And our friend Prince, he said, would you feel differently about that if Hangman was being booked properly? And we were seeing him in that. And I was like, no, not really, because to me it's like putting them belts on them. I think it devalues them. I think there was someone posted on Twitter that it was like putting a Mazda statue on top of a Ferrari. And I can see the point of doing it because we talked about it previously with what the main roster in WWE have done with NXT. But you can't do it forever, and people, if you do, then people just associate with them at that level.
Yep.
And they don't associate with them at a higher level. So they don't see him as a main event talent. They'll see, oh, he's just a trios guy, and he's not even the main roster trios guy.
Right.
So that's the danger of doing stuff like that. But they take them off them, But they do the House Invasion angle. And the problem with the House Invasion angle is not the actual angle itself, it's always the follow-up. So if you are going to do an angle like this, if you don't do good follow-up, then people just think, oh, the heel's cool. And they think it's an acceptable thing to do, and it loses its impact. Yep. The whole idea of this is something horrendous that is being done to the babyface to make you care enough for him to get his revenge. Right. That's it. There is nothing else this angle. You don't run this angle otherwise.
Right.
It's literally, that is the importance of it. So they do this angle. And I said 2 weeks ago, if he loses the match at Full Gear, he'll probably have to go heel because it'll just cut his bollocks off. Yeah. Well, what I didn't think was they cut his bollocks off 2 weeks before. So, there we go. So there's no follow-up on Rampage. There's no follow-up on Collision. Then on Dynamite, they announce a match like an hour and a half before that they're going to defend the Ring of Honor titles against the Gates of Agony. Yep. And I got to admit, I just went, oh, we'll see what they do, but what the fuck are you doing? Because this is a guy who, his family is everything. They have told you that in character. They have told you that in real life when he had to leave the program with Kenny Omega before All Out 2021. Yep. They have told you that is his driving force. Yes. So why on earth would he just walk the ring? Why would he care? Why would he not be trying to kill Swerve?
Right.
Surely that would be what you do. No, they had him just casually walk out with a funny comedic slogan and wrestle half a match.
Right.
And then, Swerve turns up and he suddenly remembers. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
But the post-match of that was way more about Matt Jackson than it was about Hangman.
Yeah, and that's because of all the fuck-ups of everything else. You then take emphasis off your money-making babyface.
Right.
Potentially, if you don't scupper him. Then, and yes, you need to do that story, and, they've had to redesign that 3 or 4 times. But yeah, they made that finish more about the Bucks thing going on with Kenny than they did about Adam Page.
Yep.
And then we make it worse, because, that's what we do now. So there's no consequences for this home breaking. There's no consequences to Swerve, like there's no consequences to Jay White, where there used to be consequences.
Yes.
Things used to have consequences in this company, right? So then there's nothing on Rampage. And then on Collision, Swerve has a match with AR Fox, who attacks him from the start, uses that thing that we should have seen from Hangman.
That was a great start to Collision. That was a great start to Collision. That was a fantastic way to start the show. Why is AR Fox doing it? We are never going to see him again. He will show up for the title shot in another 5 weeks. And I say that as nicely as possible. I'm not trying to shit on AR Fox, who I like a lot. Anyway, sorry.
No, but that match is then made to showcase Swerve again. So again, we're seeing the heel wrestling, we're heel showcased. We're not seeing the babyface wrestle. We don't see the babyface after, right?
Yep.
We then get Alex Abrahantes cutting the promo for him, like he's some guy that just can't cut a promo, that he's more worried about it than Paige was.
Yep.
Paige went out and wrestled a match. He didn't show. You didn't hear his words. You didn't see how angry he was. You didn't see anything. So you do that. And that's where you've completely cut his bollocks off. And you think, it can't get any worse. And no, then we do again. So then we do, Swerve's going to wrestle Penta. All right, okay, fine. You come to the day, Swerve comes to wrestle Penta, we banned Hangman from ringside. Right, let me get this straight. And there's people that defended this. And I really want to defend your logic and how you see faces and heels. And if you think any babyface is ever going to be over in this company ever again, unless they're pretending to be a heel, you banned the babyface who never said anything about this, who went out and wrestled a match and never challenged it and didn't just go and hunt down this heel, who didn't go out and attack him after the AR Fox match, so didn't interrupt the match on the Saturday, but apparently he's going to interrupt this one now. Explain to me, one, why that makes any sense logistically and logically, and explain to me as well, like, how is that a babyface wanting revenge, right? So, I love this line. So on Brian and Vinny on Friday, somebody texted in and they said, he waited until after the match to come out, obedient millennial cowboy. And, Brian Alvarez said, well, that doesn't make a top star. And he's right.
He's right.
He's right. So, if he cares that much, if he cares about investing people that much, and he's that far after Swerve, and this is all he wants, and he wants to drive him into the ground, he's not going to care about some match. He doesn't care about, that match has to happen, and then I'll attack him. No, he's just going to go and attack him. He's going to get revenge for his family, because that's the most important thing for him, because that's what strong baby faces do. They don't care.
Right.
And then what? They have him hit people at the end of the security with the chairs and that sort of thing, and they're like, don't hamper the match. He's not going to care. That's what he should be doing. This is what a strong babyface would. This is good at that. Because they do all this, and they do it in the Pacific Northwest, and they have Swerve go out and do media as well, and they've done nothing with him, and you spotlighted the heel for 2 months, he gets booed.
Right.
He's getting his revenge. They should be cheering him, and they're not. And why are they not? Because you've not given him that momentum, you've not given him that voice, and you've not given him the right booking to do so. You've made him look a fool. You made him look an idiot. And the worst, they did this better last year.
Yes.
They ran this last year. Jon Moxley, Adam Page. They had him interrupt the matches on Rampage. They had him cost him the weirdly named Trios Battle Royal. Had like 50 names to it. They did this better themselves. And yes, he should have cut a promo earlier then. But then when he did cut a promo, and yes, that was on the third quarter of Rampage hidden away as well, and that's another topic for another day. He cut the promo around, the guy in the ambulance that kept asking him, what's his name about his kid.
Yes.
One of the best promos of the year. But he has to do this. Sorry.
He has to do. No, I'm going to say right up there is I'm going to take my son to your grave every year and we're going to pee on it. I mean,
yeah.
Like, these are fucking evocative promos. These are really good promos.
This guy has to do it, though. So he doesn't get the opportunity to do 20 babyface promos in every year. And there has not been many good babyface promos in AEW this year.
No.
And that is something else that we've lost. And that's where you look at the challenger brand. So what was their things that are iconic at the start? So we've looked at, baby faces. We've looked at, tag team division. We've looked at, titles and amount of titles and importance of titles. One of the other things that was a standout, that was a difference maker, was strong promos. Promos in the ring. Promos that made you feel, promos that made you care. This guy can deliver them, and I don't care what you think or what you want to. People want to. It's so funny. People will say, "Oh, he's not a good promo." He is one of the best emotional talkers in making you invested in a company, and that's not just me saying that. He is. Look at that promo. With what's his name? That changed the whole course of that program instantly.
Yes.
Because before then, you didn't know why he was so mad, and all of a sudden you got it, and it took 1 minute and 30 seconds, not 6 promos for a show, or taking 5 to 10 minutes. 1 minute and 30 seconds, just like that. And yes, it wasn't positioned properly. It should have been positioned on Dynamite. And I know you say, it should be on Rampage. If you put something on the third quarter of Rampage and you don't put it on Dynamite, it's worthless in some ways. He needs then, if you're not going to do that, then he needs another promo on Dynamite. You have to show all parts of your audience. But it's the same thing. So now what's he doing? He's digging himself out of a hole again with his promo. And it has to be a home run, because otherwise he's fucked.
Right.
Yeah, and this is the thing. You can't do that to your baby faces. You can't. You're giving themselves no shot. And, he comes out and he delivers that promo on Saturday on Collision, which was pre-taped. So, they pre-taped that Wednesday. So why haven't they pre-taped other things? Why have we not seen his presence everywhere else? Why was that not even on Dynamite? We had 5 MJF promos. I'm sure we could have done that. You have to position these things well, and you can't put it in a hole where he needs to deliver that promo. Kenny Omega doesn't need to deliver. Chris Jericho doesn't need to deliver these promos because he's promoing every week in front of a crowd, and half of them aren't great at the moment. But it doesn't matter because he's there and people associate with that. This guy has to do that and then live up to that and bring it up to a higher standard to make up for all the things they fucked up in this. Sorry.
No, this is like what I talked about a little bit last time, where I said, why are we not lightening the load? Like you said, MJF is trying to do too much. He's trying to be every possible iteration of a babyface in one program. We've got 7 different feuds going on with 7 different people right now, right? We've got the Kingdom and Adam Cole and Wardlow and Samoa Joe and Jay White and the Bang Bang Gang, and why does this? It's almost like I feel like it's not doing him any favors, right? Because your audience is going to get fed up. They're going to get tired of this guy. And what's going to happen? I think this is worth us sort of moving on, because this becomes another challenger brand conversation, right? So one of the things that I think as we get closer to Full Gear and to World's End is where is MJF losing the title and to whom? And one of the things we talked about the first couple weeks is this is the point in the title reign where you should be building somebody up. And I think it's been pretty clear, and I think, we could probably posit that the person they are building up right now seems to be Samoa Joe. And it does sort of look like I think at this point I would be legitimately shocked if MJF has a match with Samoa Joe and Samoa Joe doesn't win. That seems to be what they're doing, right? So as a challenger brand, we are going to yet again, and this feels almost, it doesn't have the same thing that it did in May of 22, right? It doesn't. And I'm not trying to put it, but yet again, we are taking a disappointing title reign by our homegrown talent, and we are taking the belt and pivoting to put it on somebody in their mid-40s who's had a long career, but most recently was with the WWE, right? That, again, I think if I was happier with MJF's title reign, I'd be more freaked out by the possibility of a Samoa Joe win. But right now, it's just like something has to change. And if this is the direction we're going to go in, then I can probably convince myself that, having a big, horrifying heel for the baby faces to chase is probably not a bad thing, right? But it's not instilling me with a lot of excitement, I guess is the best. I'm sort of more like resigned than excited.
There's this thing of everybody kind of going, and this is the thing with Hangman and Swerve, right? So Hangman has to win this next match unless you are turning him heel.
Right.
And if you are turning him heel, then you're admitting failure.
Yeah.
You're admitting, and to be fair, he shouldn't be getting any sort of reaction with everything they've done to him in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
the way they give him no momentum, the way they've kind of treated him with the press, and made him allow Punk to walk all over publicly. So you kill him as a babyface finally if you do this. And if you do that, people want somebody fresh at the top, so they look to Swerve. And we talked about it last time that Swerve is still, in his development phase.
Yes.
And it probably wouldn't benefit him to go like straight up now.
No,
because
no.
he's literally just started to cut like longer promos, get used to kind of the kind of way of building main event programs, get used to having loads of things influence it. Because when you're at that level of the card, there's so many other things that are influencing everything you're doing.
Right.
So, and then all the politics that follows that, sadly. So, but people want that because they want something fresh at the top.
Yeah.
So you run risks here. So if you did someone like Joe, or you did someone like Adam Copeland, or even Adam Cole, you run risks of these are people that people associate more with WWE or TNA. And it doesn't matter. It's the same with Christian, right? So they can do the best work of their career. They can do the greatest work of anybody. But people still associate them in that way. So you are presenting your brand in that way.
Yes.
And it worries me when you have somebody like Kenny Omega saying, like in his post-match speech, not that I want to be world champion again, but I'll just keep delivering you great matches. So you're ruling out someone like Kenny, someone who's unique. I said last week he's an albatross, and he is. But you're ruling him out as a direction for your world championship now. Right. And you're going towards potentially an aging kind of ex-WWE, ex-TNA, ex-Ring of Honor person, or anyone of that kind of origin. What does that say about your brand? So how is that a difference maker? And you can say, when they started AEW, you had Chris Jericho as your main champion. Your first TNT champion was Cody Rhodes. So you had that establishment. But then we felt like we moved past that.
Yes. Yes.
And now it feels like it's regressing, just as WWE are, potentially putting fresher faces in them positions. And that's, again, that flip, that kind of change. So that thing of we have different people in our main event and these are the people who are elevating up. Now we have that stagnation and you're in danger of encouraging that stagnation even further if you go that way. And that's why you're seeing this rebellion kind of against it. And there's still kind of so much faith in Hangman's booking, which is crazy to me, but there is, that they think that we need to elevate Swerve above him because we need somebody fresh at the top, even though he's not actually in that position. Even though we actually treat it, if Swerve gets beat by Bryan Danielson, no one has a problem. But we can't have him get beat by Adam Page because we need him in that position. But that's a look of the booking and going forward and the way we're positioning people rather than the personalities. But that's how it works out. So it just impacts I don't know.
I also want to stress for a second, because this was a meme that went on like a few weeks ago where there was a bunch of people that were like, oh, Swerve can't be I want to state very clearly that if at some point in the next 18 months Swerve is not AEW world champion, then this company is fucked. Like the issue isn't that Swerve is not ready, or that Swerve isn't going to be ready. Like, I'm at a point right now where I don't think it would benefit Swerve in the slightest to put the belt on him tomorrow. Like, he would be on an uphill climb. Like it just, and as you said, he has only been in the main event scene very recently, and he himself said he had some work to do on some stuff. Like, gain that confidence, feel good about yourself, like, get to the place where it is undeniable that you are going to be the next AEW champion. And that to me is, like I said, it better happen or this company is fucked in a lot of ways. But I just think the sad indictment on AEW right now is that I can't think of anyone other than Samoa Joe that it makes sense to put the belt on, right? And yes, I hear you about Kenny, but I also don't know that I want Kenny to have the belt right now because I don't really know that there's I don't see a clear storyline for him, and I feel like it would be more of a half-assed transitional thing. Like, I want better for Kenny than that. And I guess I don't feel that same connection to Samoa Joe, where I'm kind of like, yeah, pick up the mess. Like, good luck to you. Like, that's probably mean. I think probably what I mean is that I think that the type of heel that Samoa Joe has been during this run will have an easier time transitioning to the focus of the show being on the baby faces, right? Than it will be to being on the guy who has the belt in the first place.
Okay, so here's the question: which baby face is strong enough to chase him?
So, listen. I will out myself right now. In my absolute heart of hearts, I would have Orange Cassidy beat Samoa Joe for the AEW World Championship. Like, that would be my first choice. I realize that's extremely unlikely to happen, but that would be the best of Tony Khan's booking. A little guy beating a huge monster. Like, that's what he does best. Those are the best matches AEW does, is your little underdog guy versus your big monster guy. But realistically, there's just so many people they need to elevate right now that I don't even know this is where, like, they're so close, and yet there's so many giant mistakes that they've made recently that I'm like, how do you fix this shit? Like, this is hard.
Yeah, it is, and it is hard. And, you know, you've got the issues with Cassidy's alignment at the moment with Moxley, and they're playing with that, and it's not helped by Moxley coming back on Collision as a face, and then he's a heel, and then, like, it's the same thing as the Max thing. You use too many tools out of the box, you make it difficult for the people in normal alignments. So, yeah, that would be perfect. Or even if you just take him up for a shot, even if you're not going to put the belt on him, at least have them elevate up to a position. It's the same thing we talked about they do in New Japan, you know, and the same thing they do in WWE at the moment. And that's what they are getting right. Is you elevate them up, and then if they don't want to bring them up at that level, that's okay. But they need to have that path. You
could do a great Daniel Garcia Samoa Joe feud, quite honestly, if you want to finally turn Daniel Garcia face, move on with it. That would be like a nice little TV feud. There's a few of these that I feel like you could have some interesting. It would at least be something I'd be like, oh, I'm going to tune in for this, rather than like the MJF show.
The thing that worries me on this, and I sound very worried today, but maybe I am. Maybe I am today. I don't know. We're all cranky this week, I think. I think that's a regular occurrence now. No, the thing that worries me on this is that you have two things going on. So you will have WWE pushing Cody hard, and you're finally probably going to get that moment at WrestleMania. They're going to have a fresh champion.
Oh, you feel optimistic about that one? I'll bet you $5 Roman Reigns retains.
All right, okay, yeah, we'll do that. Okay,
done.
$5.
I love it.
$5.
Listeners,
I'll
please make a note of the date and time.
Yes, it's like £3 for 64 ounce on this exchange rate. You might get it in pounds. We'll see how we feel.
That's fair. Anyway, I apologize. I'm sidetracking you.
No, but you will have that, and you will have focus on doing that with Raw, and you may have Rhea Ripley and Becky Lynch. So you are going to have this kind of focus and elevation on the people, the kind of developing people that we talked about, and on the other side. So you may look like you're going backwards. So you're going to quickly need to go forward. So if you did like on Samoa Joe and you did on Adam Cole, oh my God, please don't do that.
God.
And it's so dangerous to think about it, because they have TV negotiations ongoing, and hopefully we'll see something out of that sooner. The sooner we see that, the better, because the network have a huge influence in this, and a lot of the time they see a name and they see, you know, someone they recognize in WWE, and that makes them instantly feel more valuable to them than these names that are produced themselves. There's this hierarchy, and it's a hierarchy that, and this is ironic, and we can talk about this as a challenge about, there's a hierarchy that AEW kind of look to eliminate. The change the world thing, that the elite slogan, and maybe it's naive, but the change the world thing wasn't just, oh, we're going to create another company and we're going to upset the status quo and WWE kind of having this huge market share in American wrestling. It's, we're going to change the culture of how this business works.
Yes.
And everybody is going to be treated with respect, and we're not going to entertain people that might be problematic in certain ways, or entertain certain behaviors, and we're going to move this business forward into a new era, so that it, you know, has the same kind of expectations in terms of working processes and workplace environment that you see across the board. Now, I work in an environment that's predominantly male, and has had to you're exactly the same. And I'm sure you've probably seen the same, but we've seen a huge kind of rapid change in how things operate and what is acceptable. And wrestling has needed that for so long.
Yes.
And that was part of it. It was, we're going to eliminate this, so everybody gets to come to work and be treated with respect. You know, and that is something that has fell by the wayside. And we all saw it fall by the wayside in the spring of 2022.
Yeah.
And by that point, because people wanted that hierarchy back in place. They didn't think people deserved to jump that hierarchy. How is this? We've never done this before.
Right.
But that was something that people believed in, and it was something people in the company believed in. I think Dave Meltzer mentioned it quite recently. That people really believed in that vision, and they thought there was another way of doing that. And whether that's because of network kind of demands giving people power, or whether it's just personality or kind of management style for Tony, whatever it is, that fell by the wayside. And bringing it back to Hangman, people tell you what his promos include, but what people do tell you that his promo include that doesn't really get reported was saying that philosophy, that mindset, that thing was what he felt and others felt was under threat, and that was a key theme of that promo.
Yes.
And I think people realised it quite recently, and maybe they realised it because Tony Khan was doing the Twitter thing and the run-up to the Title Tuesday where he was, calling out the sexual assault allegations around Vince McMahon, and then he signs Ric Flair.
Ugh.
Yep. So, and then people realised that, we would have signed Ric Flair last year if it wasn't for the TV show. And then they just held off. So he was never not going to sign Ric Flair. It was just a case of waiting until he thought things had died down. So you went from having this moral code where, you gave training for Sammy Guevara after the Sasha Banks Bailey thing, and sensitivity training, and you had consequences for social actions, not just for kind of, not just actions like, storylines on a TV show, but you had consequences in your own company for misbehavior. Right. And all of a sudden you have no consequences for misbehavior. People can ban people from TV shows. They can go out and trash people. They can do it, repeatedly. They can get people's contract offers removed. They can do anything they want, and you take that away. And then you see that publicly, not just in that, but you see it publicly in they sign Ric Flair. And it was like wool coming off people's eyes that, things that we've seen and probably acknowledged. I acknowledged that in, May 2022, this was over. Change the world era, that philosophy, that belief, that thing that made them different from WWE, who had all the criticisms about working with, their deal with Saudi Arabia. Yep. In terms of the sexual assault allegations around Vince McMahon and how women were treated for a long period within that company and many other things. All of a sudden, it's not a moral superiority, but maybe it is. But you presented yourself as a morally kind of more welcoming brand, and then you took that away.
People like to feel like they're supporting the good guys. It goes back to that comment about it being a heel promotion versus a face promotion, right? Yeah. You want to feel like your time and energy are going to good people. And nobody's perfect. And I think, I've often said there's no ethical fandom in wrestling, like sort of like there's no ethical consumption in capitalism.
Absolutely.
Like there's problematic people everywhere, and everybody's got a friend, and this one liked this tweet, and blah, 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 blah. You can play this game for days, right?
Sure.
But there's also a big difference between that and having Ric Flair show up on your television, right? And especially, days after you call out Vince McMahon for fucked up shit. Very similar fucked up shit, quite frankly. So I think it's kind of unfortunate because while on some level, yes, we've talked about this and I've said some of these things are not that hard to fix. The lack of fixing them and the lack of a clear way to fix them, a clear path forward, and the path forward being seemingly Samoa Joe is not instilling me, like I said, it's resignation. It's not excitement, right? And and God love Adam Cole because he just seems like the nicest human being on earth. And I want to stress this. He seems like a genuinely nice person and someone that probably makes their locker room a better place. But my God, he's an upper mid-carder at best. He's a supporting character. He should not be the lead. I say that with all the love I could possibly have in my heart. Like, I don't want to see him with another belt on his shoulder. He doesn't need to be the number one babyface in that promotion. Why? I've said this before, I'm going to scream it from the rooftops. You beat him. You beat Adam Cole's NXT soundly with two hands. You drubbed them off the frickin' channel. Like the night. They did, not only were you drubbed them off the night, they changed NXT completely because of how soundly you beat them. And so your decision is that you're going to take that guy and make him world champion? Like that, I don't get it. I genuinely don't get it, and it makes me question whether Tony Khan understands what being a challenger brand is and understands what made his promotion appeal to people, right? And you can argue, like, okay, we're all, this one's an Elite fan and this one's a Punk fan, whatever, blah, blah. Like, why did people start watching your show in the first place? Get back to that. That is going to get your audience back way faster. And you could still have fucking wacky skits and Roderick Strong screaming Adam and whatever, timeless Tony, whatever crazy crap you want to do.
They're just gimmicks.
Just have the booking make sense.
Yep.
Like, elevate some freaking fresh faces. Ugh.
I think that his solution is, he thinks, so you have this they say, people keep saying G1, but it's more of an N1. So it's more similar. The G1 thing's pissing me off. I'm like, yeah, 2 groups of 6 night. No.
Yes,
it's an N1.
This got announced last night. The AEW will be doing the Continental Classic. Is that what it's called?
Continental Classic. Okay.
It's a tournament that they're going to be doing with 2 blocks of 6 wrestlers. And again, this goes back to some of this stuff we're talking about in terms of people being burned. It's a tournament, and I think if they announced this 2 years ago, 2021, people would have been really excited about it. But everyone's like, oh, it's going to be a tournament. It'll be a bunch of jobbers and like 2 people that are clearly winning, right? So even though Tony Khan said it was going to feature, biggest stars, we're all dubious and expect, God love him, Tony Nese.
So when Tony does these things, and this is what, it'll be kind of an interesting thing to follow. So you announce this tournament and you run it, and you announce first guy is Bryan Danielson, because again, we center around the same people.
Yep.
And yes, it's his last year, and yes, you want to make the most out of that. But again, it's that thing where we sending him around. We're not sending him around something elevating. No, we're going to send around the guy we focus on already.
Yep.
So that's kind of difficult. So, but you do this, and the thing about, we can talk about the M1, we can talk about the G1, whichever tournament you want to think about that they're trying to replicate. The key in their is not always just, it's just great matches. No, the key to this tournament is it has stakes. So there needs to be a title shot at the end of this. And you need to advertise that. If you don't run it for a title shot and it's just another trophy like the Owen Hart Trophy, which had nothing, then what's the point? Then no one cares, right? Again, we need to get people to care. And this thing that we just think, we're just going to do some of these great matches and people are going to care. Well, they're going to enjoy them, but are they going to be memorable? Are they going to care about them? Are they going to invest further in your company? No. And that's the key. So especially if your heavyweight title picture changes and you don't know how successful that's going to be, and you're using this as a backup and you're using this to drive ticket sales, because stuff like this, the matches will drive ticket sales. This is
100% aimed at ticket sales. When he announced it and the maps flashed up of where these matches were going to be, this is 100% about ticket sales, which good for him. It should be.
It's exactly the same as how they ran the best of 7 last year and everyone told you it was a failure, and yet it was one of the biggest ticket drivers of anything they did last year. Drove huge numbers, added on to really poor numbers, saved quarter 4 from being absolutely embarrassing.
Yes.
So it's exactly the same thing. But yeah, the matches drive ticket sales. But to get anybody to care about it and to get into vested TV, then you need to do what they do with the M1 and the G1, and it needs to be story driven. So it needs to be who's going up and down on that thing, who's aiming to the top. What other stories are you telling? Are you going to tell something with Kenny Omega and Hangman Page and do something like that? You could do something like that. Are you going to tell something else with Garcia and Jericho or something?
Yep.
You build the stories into it, and you have focus on these people in certain locations, especially if they match up with locations where they're hometown or things like that. You've got a Canadian show as well in Montreal. You can do things with Kenny, with Copeland, with Jericho, whoever. But that's how you do it, and that is what they do with the M1 and the G1. So there's never a G1 where it doesn't have a Hiroshima show where Naito will win.
Right.
Same with Sonata in his hometown, same with whatever. That's what they do, because that's how you get their local crowds, but also how you get people watching. And then the other key things to do that is that the way through, the points, you need to have that kind of really close to the end. So you've got to be careful your finishes. So yeah, they don't do as many clean finishes anymore. We get a lot of interference finishes. It's a huge difference maker to the early period of time.
Yep.
And that's another thing that's just changed completely, is they don't have that feeling of you're going to see a result and it's going to be meaningful. So if you're going to do the tournament, that's what you need to make sure you do. And there's reason to do the tournament ratings. You think you're going to compete with this NBA tournament. you're trying to raise your ratings up across all 3 shows. So you're going to have 5 matches a week, probably, I don't know, 2 matches on Collision, 1 on, it's 2 groups of 6, and you got loads of matches. Jesus. So it's going to be most of your shows, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're going to do that, so you're going to have 10 matches a week? 10 matches a week. Yeah. So what are you doing? 2 on Rampage, and then, 4 on Collision, 4 on Dynamite? That looks like the way you probably have to do it. So if you're going to have to do that like that, then you think that's going to raise it up because you've got things with stakes every week. But it only works if you have stakes at the end.
Agreed.
So, and you need to promote these properly. None of this, one of the other things that we always used to have was you used to have promotion a week out. You had things to get excited for a week out.
Yes.
Now we get 1 match for Rampage and a match for Collision. What did Dave say in The Observer that was absolutely hilarious?
He brutally
said,
the next
there
week.
There was 1 match for Collision, and he was just like, I don't even have anything I want to say about that. Or I don't have the words. I can't find the words to say about that.
It was about next week's Dynamite because it's the go-home show for Full Gear. And he's like, so far they've announced John Moxley and Wheeler Yuta against Orange Cassidy and Hook. That's your go-home show. Like, whew.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not good enough.
It
doesn't get anybody excited.
No.
It's not going to get, the fact that the Bucks aren't wrestling or advertisers wrestling yet on their hometown show and promoting that, it's interesting.
But this again goes back to that
embarrassing.
Challenger brand stuff because that was a thing that was constant on Raw was that they would advertise stuff and the stuff wouldn't happen or they wouldn't advertise things. That was the thing where it was like with AEW, a week ahead of time what at least 3 matches you're going to see. And they'll add more. They always add more as you got closer, but you had that knowledge ahead of time.
And you also knew what you'd see as a live viewer.
Yes.
So if people were advertised on that card or they were advertised on that poster, you would see them.
Yes.
And you'd see them in front of the crowd. Now, you've no guarantee of seeing anybody.
No.
Unless they're John Moxley or Chris Jericho, as the joke goes.
Or FTR.
Or FTR. But yeah, you're not guaranteed to see the Elite. You're not guaranteed to see Orange Cassidy.
Nope.
I think he's like on every Collision poster and never on the shows.
He's been on 1, I think.
I think it's been on 1. Yeah, he did a couple of Ring of Honor tapings very, very late on when there was about 500 people left. But that's a story for another day. We can all talk about why.
One day we'll do that show, Trish. One day.
We will, because there's people wanting to do counter narratives and stuff. So we'll be there for that one. Don't worry. Yeah. So, but that's the thing. So you do this, and you have this live thing. So when they started out, they promised in terms of live that you would see everybody. They promised that you would see certain things and you'd see different styles of wrestling, not just ice cream. And they promised that it would be a reasonable price. Tony made a big thing about affordability.
Right.
And now we see situations where we have shows that are not affordable.
No.
The Canadian tour was ridiculous, the Collision Canadian tour particularly.
The Montreal show, the cost is ridiculous still.
Yes,
both Montreal shows are outrageous.
It's much, much higher than what WWE priced the same building on, and we've seen the Polestar on that.
Yep.
So you are outpricing your fans or overpricing your fans, and you told everybody you were affordable. Grand Slam, people brought it up every time. You told everybody you were affordable and you were a family-friendly option and you were friendly to the fan base, and now it's about $1 million gates. I don't want to hear about $1 million gates. I don't want to hear Tony talking about $1 million gates or anyone else talking about $1 million gates.
No.
Talk about your fan base. Talk about how many people you've got in the building. And it's no wonder that, they've gone back now to pay-per-views, especially our World's End is a good pricing structure.
Yes.
Full Gear had a good pricing structure. There are some new events with a good pricing structure, a lot more $20 tickets. But you have burned people. You have burned people because you came away from that strategy and what you thought you could offer the market. And then WWE countered you and undercut you. And maybe there's some pressures on that. You're trying to be profitable. You're trying to navigate the additional costs that are transportation. You're running in bigger arenas because your kind of setup negates that you must.
Yep.
But they cost much more to hire. But you have to try and protect your audience as much as you can, even if you want to increase the value, because the value of what they're getting on the shows is not as much as it was 2 to 3, 4 years ago. You are not getting as many of the great matches because you've got this increase in pay-per-view content. You are not getting as many of these people in front of you because there are so many people and they don't want to beat people. But by doing so, you are giving a weaker live product, but at a higher price. And that's not sustainable for a fan base.
No.
And then you have removed something that is iconic with yours. And there's not as much connection with the fan base. You know, they started with BTE, and you think about the meet and greets that happened on independent shows, and the meet and greets and the things that they used to do at the start of AEW. It's not as frequent. You can't go and meet some of these main eventers in a way that you could. There's not people running and jumping at doing this stuff. They've become more closed off from their fan base, and that connection is there. And now, you know, if you want to see someone publicly, or someone's going to speak publicly, most of the time you're just seeing Tony Khan. You're not seeing anybody else. He is the face of that brand. He announces the matches, everything like that. But he's also the face of that brand publicly, and even with the fan base. I mean, the point when he got to where he was going to do like a meet and greet should have been the point of everybody's like alarm bells ringing and saying, you know, this has gone wildly off track. You have to present them as open, and you have to present them as... And it's the same with the baby faces. The baby faces should be the people closing the show, not Tony Khan. Yes. The babyface... I think Claudio closed the show at the weekend with Tony or something. It's like... Claudio's great. He's not the person who should be doing that and building that kind of reaction and that kind of relationship with the crowd. It should be one of your top baby faces that you want to push up or you want to keep at that level. That's who should be doing that. They should be out doing meet and greets. You know, we're doing meet and greets. Now we're not. Why is that? What's going on here? Yeah. You need to focus on these things because you have to keep that original fan base. We're too busy trying to chase this WWE fan base and ignoring the fact they're losing their original fan base that's not interested in this stuff.
I think there is, to some degree, and I think some of this stuff is inevitable struggles of a company getting larger and more successful in some ways, right? And I don't want to underplay that because I think it's worth pointing out. That said, I think there are ways in which a smarter company would offset those. There's things that you could do to kind of say, okay, we're going to struggle, like, you know, the pressure from the network means we have to have a more expensive setup, which means we have to run larger buildings, which hits our bottom line. So we're going to have to increase ticket prices, yada, 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 yada. There's things you can do to offset that, right? The pricing structure can be, it went like freaking through the roof is I don't know, kind of the same thing is true with the promotional stuff. They're starting to get a little bit better about that right now. As you said, they're starting to do local promotion to slow off the uptake with that. That should have been happening months ago when they first started seeing that the market was softening, right? I don't want to over criticize to the point where it's like I'm not acknowledging that some of this stuff there are, you know, it just happens.
The way I look at it is you know, when Tony is asked about being a challenger brand now or their identity, he's no idea.
No.
He says, and he generally repeats it, well, we have the best roster in the world. And my answer every time I hear it is, well, we don't see it. And so what is your identity? You have to find your identity. Because I don't see them as a challenger brand anymore. I think they're a competitor. And they're a successful competitor who has expanded their content, who's likely to land a pretty large TV deal and will continue to be, you know, the second company in the US and a successful competitor for the foreseeable future. But they're not a challenger brand. There's nothing that differentiates themselves at current. And people say, oh, they offer, you know, this great match. Everybody offers great matches. That's the era we live in.
Yeah.
There has to be something different, whether it's your storytelling, whether it's the way, your attention to detail, whether it's your relationship with your fan base. What is it that makes you now unique in this wrestling marketplace?
Yep.
What is it that drives that home? Because at current, that identity, there isn't one. And there's a lot of that. And it's really funny watching like Daniel Garcia come out as a character, kind of not knowing what his identity was and thinking, and all I could think was, this is like literally a representation of the whole company right now.
Yeah.
And that's it. So yeah, you're a competitor now. You are not a challenger brand. You have lost that ethos. If you want to change, and challenger brands can change and can pick up and change their identity, but you have to be careful when you mix up that recipe. And that's the position they're in for me.
I think it's pretty much hit the nail on the head, and probably where we should finish for the week, because I don't know that we're going to say anything better than that at this point.
Oh, this we're very cranky this week, but look, I think it was very interesting to see the kind of culmination of things just kind of brew over with that Dynamite, and see like everybody just kind of going a little bit insane, and it just felt like everything kind of come into fruition. So it does feel like a good time to talk about this.
Yes.
I will say, if you want to challenge any points, if you don't agree with us, then great. Please just let us know. Challenge. I love that. I don't. I take no pride in being right on things.
No,
I don't want to be right. I want to be wrong.
I'd like to change my mind. I'd like someone to be like, "Hey, you didn't think about this," and go, "Hey, you're right. I didn't think about this, guys. Let me redo what I did last week."
Absolutely. So yeah, if you have any comments, you want to challenge us on anything, or want anything that we can feedback on that we can then bring up and talk about in future, you can email us. See my little sideways segue there. You can email us at trishandsarahpod@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at Trish and Sarah, or you can find us wherever you normally find us. Group chats. You can abuse me on Twitter. I'm pretty good with that. And you can even catch us up on YouTube, which will get much more up and running this week. But yeah, if you do have any thoughts or comments or anything that you think about in this discussion, or if you do think they are a challenger brand, tell us why. If you think there's baby faces, who are we missing? Who are we missing that could chase down a heel, experienced guy like Samoa Joe and be this, this next baby face? Are we too harsh on the Hangman thing? I don't know. But we'd love your feedback. And I got to say, last week, I think it was tremendous for us, all the different kind of variations, feedback, and from people that we didn't even know were listening. So hello to our new listeners. I think that's a good time to wrap it up. Hope you've found this discussion pretty thought-provoking. And until 2 weeks, and after Full Gear, we'll be after Full Gear. Yeah, so we'll see how that pay-per-view works out.
Deal with the fallout from Full Gear.
Full Gear fallout. So until 2 weeks' time, I've been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
And we thank you all for listening.